Chris, the reason why we have so much fraud and scams these days is because we're asked for so much information. And all that information gets leaked, gets breached, ends up on the dark web, and people use that to scam you. So it's actually insecure what they're doing. And so I try to point this out to these people, but of course, a lot of them are just employees. They're not going to change anything. So yeah, it is the case that we have complied too much, and we've given our information too readily, and we've traded convenience for privacy and freedom in too many instances. And so it is time. It is certainly time for people to fight back against that, to reject these things, to make people uncomfortable when they ask for them, and to do things like use cash as often as you can. I only use cash when I'm dealing with kind of person-to-person interactions in the real world. And yeah, start to make people uncomfortable for asking for this really personal information that just 10 or 20 or 30 years ago would have been insulting for somebody to ask. And certainly we would not have given it.
Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to my Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Thank you.
Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 199. I have Gabriel Custodiet. He runs the Watchman Privacy podcast. We're going to talk about issues, with regard to privacy and how your computer and your smartphones are spying on you and what kind of information they're collecting and who's collecting this information and why, and how we can keep ourselves safe in this very interesting world we live in. How are you, Gabrielle?
I'm doing a lot better than you are by the sound of things, but I'll try to talk more so that you don't have to. You can heal that throat. But I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Obviously, these are important topics, and I've got plenty to say on them. And I'll say from the start, it is possible to be private. Don't take the black pill. That's the real psyop.
That's solid advice. Yeah, don't take the black pill. And, and I think you'd also agree we don't have to go out and live out in the woods and cut ourselves off completely. We can use this stuff and derive benefits from it without, necessarily getting into all the, getting into everything else. Okay. So, what got you interested in all this?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are interested in having privacy as protection from the state and corporations and all the other nefarious things that we deem to be our adversaries. And so I think everybody should be interested in privacy. I was just somebody who saw the need. I started the brand as I became aware of, let's say, just to use a broad term, libertarian view of the world. And it seemed like a very important thing. And so I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to describe some of the tactics that I had learned and tested. I've been living what I call a pure privacy lifestyle for many years now. And so I live this stuff, excuse me. And I just wanted to create something that would bring value to others, maybe have the chance for a little bit of a side income. And I've made a lot of connections as a result of this. It's been very rewarding. And I just keep producing stuff. I, talk about the tactics. I also talk about the philosophy, which is one thing that when I got into the privacy stuff, there was a lot of people, cybersecurity nerds who were saying, don't do this and don't do this and lock down this. But I like to take a step back, look at the big picture, talk about the lifestyle aspects of this and explain it in what I think is a more grounded view, a more, first of all, philosophically grounded view, and also a more step-by-step approach that does not necessarily handhold, but it does guide you to the most extreme amount of privacy that you feel comfortable with. So yeah, those are some of the things that I think distinguish me. And, as I said, I think everybody should be interested in privacy. I'm just the one who kind of hit record and did some of the research, wrote a book, and put it out there for people to view.
Yeah, what's the title of your book?
Title is The Watchman Guide to Privacy. So that's on Amazon. I also created my own store along with a colleague of mine. So if you go to watchmanprivacy.com, you'll find all of this stuff. But you can purchase everything that I sell in Monero, which is a privacy crypto, in Bitcoin or in fiat. And we have a website, a store, almost no analytics. We use free and open source software. We don't ask for anything except email address, which you can use a burner email address. So everything we do, we respect your privacy, not like companies that say we respect your privacy, right? We don't have a privacy policy. We actually care about your privacy. So all this stuff that I'm going to be talking about can be found on the website, watchmanprivacy.com.
What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that the average user makes with regard to privacy today?
I think one of the biggest mistakes is we encounter every time we start up an internet browser, every time we seek out some kind of service provider, every time we interact with somebody also in the physical world, we assume that they are going to protect our data, protect our information, and they don't and they can't. So when you go to the dentist and they say, hey, they give you the tablet nowadays, right? And you need to give your name and your national ID number in some cases and your address. And they say they're going to protect this. Maybe you trust them, you shouldn't, because what they're doing, and this is how the world works these days, is there's so many third parties, right? There's so many third parties anytime you go to a car mechanic or a dentist or any website. And so this data is immediately shared with many other people beyond this person, this entity. And so you're not just trusting it to them, but you're trusting it to all of these service providers that they rely on. And it's inevitable that those service providers will maybe get subpoenaed one day, or more likely get that data leaked or breached. And so really the only solution is to give out less information. And you can do that by simply refusing, only giving the kinds of things that is absolute minimum. And then there's other techniques we can use to have kind of burner emails and alternative phone numbers and all this other stuff. But that is the easiest, that's the most foundational thing for people to realize is we're asked for all of this information about us and any given interaction that we have in our market societies. And we need to be very selective and learn to refuse and learn what the alternatives are so that our data does not start to get out there and make privacy a very difficult proposal.
Yeah, and one thing you forgot, often you go to the dentist, they'll ask you for your birthday. In fact, I get asked that question probably more than anything. But, I do wonder if maybe the public really hasn't been vigilant about stuff like this. And maybe we'd be better off if the public had been more vigilant. I mean, back in the 90s, I knew people who absolutely refused to give blood because the Red Cross would ask for your social security number. And I agree with that sentiment. I mean, why does the Red Cross need my social security number to give blood? And they say, well, it's just a way to keep track of everybody, but do you think maybe that's part of the problem is that people just aren't vigilant enough?
Yeah, I think that certainly got us to where we are, where I was just, for example, on a financial website the other day, and I had to create some kind of account in this instance, and I gave them all the stuff they wanted, right? One thing I do is when it comes to giving information, if it's a financial institution, there's really no way around that sort of thing. So that's one exception. And I gave them what they wanted, and at the end they said, "Yeah, we couldn't verify you." Right? What does that mean exactly? Verification? That's a very funny thing. And so they wanted like a selfie of me, or I think an ID, a copy of my ID. And so I just kind of stalled that particular one. But yeah, it's really insulting when you think about it, how much information is asked of you, and for what reason, right? For your safety, for your security. These institutions, these companies are going to get that data, as I said, leaked and breached. The reason we have fraud, Chris, the reason why we have so much fraud and scams these days is because we're asked for so much information. And all that information gets leaked, gets breached, ends up on the dark web, and people use that to scam you. So it's actually insecure what they're doing. And so I try to point this out to these people, but of course, a lot of them are just employees. They're not going to change anything. So yeah, it is the case that we have complied too much, and we've given our information too readily, and we've traded convenience for privacy and freedom in too many instances. And so it is time. It is certainly time for people to fight back against that, to reject these things, to make people uncomfortable when they ask for them. and to do things like use cash as often as you can. I only use cash when I'm dealing with kind of person-to-person interactions in the real world. And yeah, start to make people uncomfortable for asking for this really personal information that just 10 or 20 or 30 years ago would have been insulting for somebody to ask. And certainly we would not have given it.
You brought up something here that definitely is something that I'm starting to notice, uh, about the use of cash. It's getting to the point now where businesses are making it difficult to use cash. And you also have these cashiers and clerks who are just so unbelievably stupid that they don't know what to do when they see cash anymore. I mean, and to me, that's sometimes I'm wondering if that's what's fueled people to use credit cards more often too, because you pay in cash, you've got now probably a 20% chance that they're going to screw something up. They're going to miscount the money or something. I mean, what it seems like, it really does seem like we're kind of helpless here. What can we do, for example, about cash, about getting him, about, fighting for our, the, I guess the right or the privilege of paying with cash?
Yeah. So believe me, I know what you're saying, and nothing will really waken you up to the decline of IQs in the West than paying in cash, because you'll see these cashiers look at it like they're holding, I don't know, a search warrant or something. They're so confused. They give you the incorrect change. You might lose money in some, but you might get money back more than you were due in some cases. So look, I think people should pay in cash for everything. I only use credit cards a couple times a year, especially at airports where I could be going in any given direction. It's a nice anonymous place to use a credit card, just so that they don't get canceled, because credit cards do have their purpose, but their purpose is fairly limited, certainly in the physical world. Obviously, when we're online, we need to use electronic payments of various kinds. But when it comes to cash, I think people just need to start, first of all, accumulate cash. Okay, so get comfortable with having a few $100s in your wallet or in your purse. Be comfortable and going to your bank, taking out cash from the ATM, just having more cash on you. That's the first thing that you need to do. Some people just don't take those steps, and that's a big mistake. Once you do that, you'll obviously have to just start using it. And you can make things easier for the cashiers, right? Just kind of do some of the counting yourself so that there's minimal change. You can tell them, hey, I don't need my coins, because these coins are worthless these days, right? Anyway, Chris. And so you can make their lives a little bit easier, and you just have to have a little bit more vigilance yourself. So that's the incompetence of your average person who's a cashier. In addition to that, there's a lot of discouragement for using cash, right? You'll go to businesses and they simply don't have change for you. So you need to make sure, if you have, let's say, if you're in the US $100 bills, make sure to get those broken down in places where they can break them down. So that's usually later in the day when there's more cash in the cash register. That's a good time to break down large denominations. Or you can go through the automatic checkouts in a lot of places, and they are more likely to be able to give you the correct change, right? Because it's automated. So you, in those cases, they're likely to have the change for you. They're likely to verify that $100 bill without the 5 minutes of scrutiny. And so that's a good way of going about it. But look, my thing is, you know what you need to do, so just start doing it, and you will find the solutions. And I infrequently find places where I cannot use cash these days. So it's certainly still possible. The real thing holding it back is everybody out there who is not using cash, who's making my opportunity to use cash less available. So I blame everybody just as much as the companies.
Yeah, that's true. I remember I was on Interstate 95 in Delaware a couple months ago, and it was actually still one place where they had a cash toll booth. And I just said, okay, I better go do this. Drove up, handed the guy the cash, and I was done. And I just, said to people, fight for your right to pay cash tolls, because completely anonymous transaction. And that seems to be what they want to get rid of. What do you think about cell phones? Because this is something I can remember back when cell phones came out, people said to me, this is a tracking device. And it is a tracking device, but jumped into that. What can we do with cell phones? What's your recommendations for cell phones?
Yeah, I'm preparing to do a lot of work here on cell phones in the upcoming months. I have a course that I've just launched that a lot of people are finding value with. And I'm about to write a new version of my privacy guide. So I'm planning to kind of double down on explaining phones because, again, I'm not somebody who just says, "Hey, don't use this, don't use that." We can have convenience. We can use some of the tools at our convenience. The problem with phones, and this is different from computers, is that they are designed to function away from internet connectivity. So that's what mobile data is. And when you are out there using your phone, you're away from Wi-Fi, you're away from a wired connection. And your phone, how it functions is it is going to connect to a nearby cell tower. So that is itself a tracking mechanism, right? It is able to triangulate your location. And that is a very revealing thing, right? Your geolocation. And so phones really right now are not designed for you to have privacy, unfortunately. And so the first thing I encourage people to do is use fewer, just use your phone less. You really don't need your phone as often as you think. I oftentimes travel around and I don't have a phone. Now, maybe I'll have a phone as an emergency kind of tool, and I'll put that in a Faraday bag, which is a bag that blocks all signals. So there's no tracking happening when it's in the bag. Of course, you can't use it when it's in the bag, but there's no tracking happening when it's in the bag. You would have to take it out to use it. So I would first say people can use their phones less. And that's really the best solution, is to use private messengers like Signal. And that works on your computer. I almost never use Signal on a phone. I use it on a computer. So let's say I make a trip to New Zealand and I don't bring a phone with me. Well, I can still use my computer to talk to people who have Signal using Signal, or WhatsApp, let's say, or some of these other options that we have that are computer-based. And a computer is not going to be triangulating your location like a phone would be. So there's a lot we could say about phones, but I think that's the most fruitful solution, is for people just to use your phone less. There's nothing your phone can really do that your computer can't do, besides, that last few minutes where you need to message your friend and confirm, hey, are you at the Starbucks? I'm coming. But even in that case, Chris, I have found that I just tell people, like the old days, right? Hey, let's meet here. I'm not going to have a phone, so just meet there. Don't mess up. And people can do that. So as with all things, my approach is minimalism and reduction. Privacy is about reduction, not addition. So just start using your phone less, and you might find that you really don't need it as much as you think.
This brings up another question there too, though. And I've said to people, I try to go out and find a working payphone right now. You're not going to find one. I think, and I can remember when, it wasn't that hard to find a working payphone. Do you think we can ever get payphones back or not?
Yeah, it's a good question. It depends where you are in the world, of course, but from what I understand about the U.S., payphones are dead. Now, if you were, let's say you needed to use a public phone, there are scenarios where you could walk into a business or go to a public library and say, hey, I don't have my phone on me. My phone broke. Can I make a phone call? Something like this. So that's one approach for people. Again, when you get to these techniques, you just have to be confident and good at social engineering, and not afraid to be in an uncomfortable spot, right? Going into a hotel and saying, hey, my phone broke. Can I make a quick call? Is a weird thing for most people, but it kind of replaces the old payphone approach in a way, because that's a publicly listed phone and it doesn't have all of the, the connection to your name that your own cell phone would have. But I don't know that payphones are ever coming back. I think that all physical connection phones are dead and gone. I don't think those will ever come back, but there are some alternatives that you can practice. And instead of a payphone, I think that there are options to make your phone better. A lot of people have migrated to an alternative operating system on their phone called Graphene OS, and that doesn't solve the triangulation issue. So I don't just kind of blanket recommend that, but it strips out the Google services from your phone, and it you're also not using Apple in that case, because Apple and Google are your biggest adversaries when it comes to phone privacy. So a Graphene OS phone can be something that people look into. And I think just have fewer apps on your phone, right? Because those are also companies who oftentimes get access to your phone's location and other choice information about your phone. So just relying on your phone less is always the solution.
Yeah, I'm getting very much to this point too, where it's like everybody wants me to install an app, and I'm like, no, I don't want to install an app. And sometimes it's just for to do something once every 6 months. I mean, uh, yeah, Graphene. I've heard a lot of good things about Graphene OS. Does it work with all the carriers?
Yeah. So what a Graphene OS phone is doing is it's basically an Android operating system. So it is a version of Android that has stripped out all of the Google services. So there's no Google Play Store, and there's no Google navigation, right? So that means that you are not going to as easily use your GPS apps. And that is a problem for a lot of people, because for most people, that's the only thing they really want their phone for is GPS navigation. So it's not, I wish I had a blanket recommendation for phones. A lot of people just say, hey, install this nice privacy operating system, Graphene OS, and call it a day. But it has limitations, and it's certainly not a, there is no solution for the triangulation, the geolocation triangulation of a phone. But it would work. It should work with all carriers. And there's actually a service that I tend to recommend. You can pay for it anonymously in Monero or Bitcoin, and it's called Silent Link. And the website is, let me just double check, it should be silent.link. And this is an awesome service. I've talked to these people on my show. I've investigated it quite a bit. So you can pay for it anonymously, right? So with Monero or Bitcoin, so there's no attachment to your name. It's an eSIM, which means that you don't have a physical SIM card shipped anywhere. So there's no connection to you that way. And it's a international company. So your phone service will work in pretty much any country you are in the world. It just automatically starts using the local carriers in that area. And you just go back and top up this service every now and then. I've tested this internationally. I think it's a very intriguing product, and it's frankly, it's pretty good. So that's kind of what I would recommend. And if you were in the US, for example, using Silent Link, it would just automatically start using AT&T or Verizon or T-Mobile, whatever is the strongest signal in your particular location. It can kind of adapt on the fly. So that's an easy recommendation for me.
Talking about GPS though, I live in a horrible traffic city, and I have to admit that's one thing I appreciate about Google Maps is sometimes Google Maps will help me avoid a major traffic jam. Is there any way we can, have this benefit without the risks?
Yeah, the answer is not really, because what you're doing at that point is you're going to be moving to a privacy preserving phone system like Graphene OS, and then you're going to be kind of stuck on things like inferior versions of Google Maps or Waze, and those don't have auto updated traffic and things of this sort. So it's really not a panacea. So I understand that people like the GPS. If you were inclined to get an old-fashioned GPS that you kind of put on your dashboard, like the old-fashioned Garmin ones, pay for cash with one of those. Sometimes that can be a better solution. But you could also just say, hey, I have my phone. I at least have a private phone, and then I purchased it with no connection to my name. I'm very careful what I put on here. I don't give my real information to Apple if I have an iPhone. And I just use this phone for my navigation. And I kind of do what I can to not make other connections to my name, and just live with that. It's better than going the full surveillance route, because I do know that navigation for a lot of people is really important. But there's trade-offs to everything, Chris. So I'm not the one who says, yeah, use this and this will solve your problems. It is always, hey, no, you're just going to need to learn to give up certain things. Certain conveniences is really the only way if you want to slant more privacy than convenience.
Well, it's also something I've noticed in some cities, some cities in South America where, You don't really have a lot of street signs, and GPS kind of is the only thing you can use to, so you don't get lost, whether it be in your car or walking. Uh,
Yeah.
that is one thing. Is it possible to buy a cell phone anonymously nowadays?
Oh yeah, you can go into, so I think you're in the US, you can go into a Best Buy, buy a phone with cash. That's not a problem. Maybe if you're worried about the cameras or something, just wear a cowboy hat, maybe a COVID mask or something, pay for your phone in cash. The bigger problems come, and then the next thing I would recommend people to do is to don't start that up. Go to a Starbucks away from your house, and that is where you would start it up and give your, that's where if you were going to install Graphene OS, you would do it at that point. And otherwise, just kind of do your sign up process away from home, so there's no geolocation triangulating to your house at that point, so that you can make your decision. And the trickier thing, Chris, is Google and Apple are going to want you to sign up, right? Sign up for their services. Otherwise, you have reduced functionality on that phone. And so you're going to have a kind of a burner phone number ready, secondary email address, and we can discuss these things. And if you do that, if you at least do those things, and you're careful what apps you install, so that you're not necessarily logging into apps with your real name. That's another thing you have to consider. There's a lot of things to consider. Then you can have more privacy than you otherwise would. But you can purchase a phone privately. It just immediately starts to make connections to you based on your other activities after you purchase it.
Yeah, that's true. You always have this connection to things, and let's go to some other things too. Maybe you don't cover this much, but can you buy a bus ticket or a plane ticket without giving out with it? Well, you probably can't do it with a plane ticket. But what about a bus ticket?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's going to depend. It's going to depend on various things. So if I recall, I was in, where was I? Last time I took a bus trip, I was somewhere in Central or South America. And you go up to buy the ticket. Obviously, you're not buying it online. Okay. You're not buying it through their app. You're going up to the ticket booth and you're purchasing it in cash from the person. In most cases, they're going to want a name. And at that point, you start to think, okay, are they going to check my ID? Right? Is the real question. In this situation, they didn't check my ID. So that's nice. And it does mean that in many situations, like, they don't really care. But another thing you can do when it comes to your name, so that is really the main concern. You're buying a bus ticket. Are they going to check my passport? Okay. So now don't let them scan your passport. That's a separate topic. But are they going to check my passport and compare it to the name that I give them? At that point, you have a couple of options, right? What if you gave them a similar name to yours, but it was misspelled a little bit, right? That would make sense. That would be a plausible explanation for why it doesn't match your passport. And they'd probably just let you go on your way. You could give your middle name. You could give your first name and your middle name and not give your last name, right? That's your name. That might show up on your passport, and they're likely to say, okay, no problem. You could give your initials. You could give a nickname. You could do things like this so that you have not given your real name and you have a plausible explanation if they were to confirm that, verify that compared to your passport.
Most certainly. One of the things also is apparently, do driver's licenses in America have information on them? Because I've noticed they now have these magnetic strips, and what's going on with that?
Yeah. So if you go to a bar or a alcohol store in the U.S. and they want to scan your driver's license, I would certainly refuse that. Say, hey, no, you can look at it, but you can't scan it. I'm pretty sure, Chris, that if they scan it, I'm not sure if it's just kind of verifying your age or if it is kind of downloading. There's a transmission of the data that is on your ID card. I would not be comfortable letting your stuff get scanned. So at that point, I would, and this is where you really need to put your foot down as a privacy seeker and say, look, you hold it. First of all, you don't give it to them. You say, here, hold it right up to them. And this is a great idea to have a wallet that has a clear covering, and you can just open the wallet and show them, right? And they're going to say, hey, I need to hold that. And you can say, I'll show it to you, but I do not want you to scan it or write anything down. And just be insistent and put your foot down. And if you're causing an inconvenience for them, probably just let you continue on. But I would not let them be scanning these things because there will likely be a collection of data and therefore evidence that you were at that particular place at that particular time.
Yeah, that's interesting. When we talked about phones, what about your home computer or your laptop?
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of having your computer be the centerpiece of your digital life. And I don't really use phones much at all. The computer is where it's at, and you can do everything on a computer. And I would argue, not argue, I think you can be a lot more productive on a computer than on the phone. And so big proponent of computers. The first caveat is you're really going to want to consider Linux, a Linux operating system, as opposed to your Mac computer. Well, your Mac operating system, it's more difficult these days putting Linux on a Mac, but you can always put Linux on a computer, a PC, right? And there are some ways to get Linux on a Mac computer. But that's the first thing you're really going to want to consider is installing a version of Linux. I tend to recommend a Linux Mint. Anybody who uses Windows will be very familiar with it. It's not terribly difficult to learn Linux. And the reason why you want to consider Linux is because Mac and Windows have all kinds of analytics that they're collecting on you. Windows is worse about this, but Mac is not. It's not a that much of a better option. And so I encourage everybody to consider Linux. So they're collecting analytics on you. We don't know exactly what Windows is collecting. There's some theories and some evidence to suggest that they're collecting most of your actions that you do on your computer. So you can. It's been a while since I used these, but as I just said that kind of put a chill down my spine, right? If Windows can see everything you're doing and transmit it back to the mothership, that's pretty bad, right? So you should definitely use a computer. You should definitely make that the centerpiece of your digital life, and you should definitely consider getting to Linux, which is an operating system that is open source, so we can see everything it's doing, and it is not collecting your data in nearly the way that these other operating systems are collecting it.
Yeah, and of course, Mac OS, as we know it today, is a variant of the original Unix that came out at AT&T, which is also where we got Linux from. But obviously, it's went in a different way. Yeah, I know there's a lot of different Linux distributions. I've not used Mint, but I've certainly heard good things about it. Is there, who do you think is worse? Do you think Droids are worse than Macs, or do you think you obviously think Windows is worse than Apple? Well, what about Droid versus Apple? Who do you think's worse on privacy?
Yeah, so for phones, Apple's belief is that they can protect you. You trust them, they will protect you, and they will give you privacy. Now, I think there's a metaphysical problem with both. I don't think that somebody else can. Well, somebody cannot grant you privacy. Privacy exists when nobody's granting you anything. So there's a metaphysical problem with somebody promising to give you privacy. But with that said, Apple is certainly a much more secure environment. I was reading the other day about 99% of malware on phones is on Android phones. Okay, 99%. So you should never, I'm just going to say this, you should never buy or use an Android phone unless you intend to turn that into a Graphene OS phone. Just if you're going to be a normie, just use an Apple phone. It is less likely to screw you over. And there are more privacy guarantees from Apple because, I'm not trusting Apple. I don't want to trust. I don't trust Apple. But if there's only those two options, then I think you're better off with Apple than with Google's Android platform, which is both insecure and is more invasive.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, And are there any brands of computers that you think are better or worse, or do you think they're all? Or I don't know how much can we control this at the hardware level?
Yeah, the hardware of the computer is less important. When we think about phones, we tend to think of, it's really the operating system that is our big threat with the device. And so you can get any PC, most laptops, and install Linux on there, and you don't have to be worried about what the hardware is doing, right? The hardware is simply the raw material, the silicon, the electricity that is doing what the operating system tells it to do. And so I would be less concerned about the device you're using and more concerned about the operating system that is controlling all of that physical matter.
Yeah, and what do you think about what do you think there are some browsers that are better than others?
Um, yes, and I would first say that it's much more important what you do on your browser. So it's not the first question. It's not the first recommendation I would give people when talking about internet privacy is, oh, choose this browser or that browser, because it doesn't matter what browser you're using if what you're using it for is you're logging into Facebook and you're using Facebook, and you're logging into Amazon in the same session, and there's a cross-contamination of cookies so that Facebook is seeing certain things from your Amazon account potentially. So it's a lot more important your behavior on an internet browser, avoiding social media, avoiding a lot of big tech platforms, not being logged into Google, Gmail while you browse, and that sort of stuff. I will say if you are seeking out a browser, I use a lot of LibreWolf these days. LibreWolf is an offshoot of Firefox. Okay, so you have Firefox, and then LibreWolf is an offshoot of Firefox. LibreWolf is good in that it has a lot of the smaller privacy settings that, again, it's more important your activity, your behavior on a website. But it's protecting you in a lot of ways. It can also break some things. So again, there's a trade-off. And anybody who wants to have privacy, the first thing to do is to experiment and to practice and to understand some of the systems so that when something breaks, something stops working, you understand, oh, it's because I'm using this browser or I'm using this ad blocker or something like this. So what I would tell people is download LibreWolf, see how that works for you, do certain things on there. I would say another tool in your kit should be the Tor browser. The Tor browser is very extreme because it's hiding your IP address, and it's considered a very suspicious browser. So don't log into your bank accounts with the Tor browser. Don't log into most of your accounts with the Tor browser, but use the Tor browser for searching for things and research and these kinds of things. You can do a similar thing with your LibreWolf browser. And then you can have let's say a third browser, and this is where you would log into your traditional accounts and just have some segregation. I think that's another really crucial strategy is you can have multiple browsers. You can use Chrome if you need to, but do the more privacy demanding things on your more locked down browser like LibreWolf. I hope that wasn't too poorly explained. I'm happy to try to re-explain that if that wasn't good.
No, that was a good answer. Yeah, that helps a lot. What do you think about VPN clients?
Yeah, so VPN is essential for me. I don't ever access the internet without a VPN. And a VPN it's a piece of software, and it's also a service run by a company where it hides your IP address from your internet service provider. So if you're in the UK and you have internet service through Sky, well, they can see all the websites that you visit, and that sucks, right? That's not good. So a VPN that you purchase and you pay for, and always pay for a VPN, don't choose a free one, will hide your internet activity from your internet service provider. And that does mean that you have to trust the VPN company, but you will have selected a VPN that is not logging, that has been audited to prove that it does not log this information, and all that kind of good stuff. So VPN is essential. I tend to recommend people, Molvad VPN is the best one that I've been using recently, and it's the company with a high level of integrity as well. So I would definitely recommend people to move towards Molvad VPN. and just kind of experiment with a VPN. And at the end, once you've gone the furthest distance, you will always be using a VPN, whatever you're doing. It will break some things. There will be some discrimination on websites because it can't, it doesn't know who you are. And so it will not serve you, which is pretty stupid when you think about it. But this does happen. So I would say just get a VPN, use it often you can, realize what it's doing, realize why you want it, and move to the point where you're like me, where you have a VPN on your router so that you're never not connected to a VPN. So that's the end goal, but certainly get your feet wet. VPNs are crucial to internet privacy.
Yeah, is it fair to say that you should probably avoid using anything that's free?
In general, that's the motif is if it's not free, then you are, or if it's free, then you are the product. The caveat I would have is there's a lot of good free and open source software where you can, on Linux, for example, you can get Linux for free. You're not paying for it. And this is created and run by volunteers who are doing amazing work, and there's no profit motive behind something like Linux. And let's see, what are some other programs that I have here on my desktop? So I'm actually in my software manager on the computer, and I see all kinds of free and open source software. Audacity, that is a audio editing software. You have Kdenlive, it's a free video editing software. So there's a lot of good software that is free, but when it comes to a service that clearly has a lot of bandwidth to keep up with, like a VPN, for example, that is a very costly business to run, that you do want to be paying for things like that. Whereas other things, kind of software that is less intensive, does not really have a lot of operating expenses. It's less important. And in fact, the FOSS movement, the free and open source software movement, is one of the best things we have going for us with privacy. So I hope that explained it well. You kind of brought up a good point, which is that there's no blanket way to say avoid free stuff, because I do rely on a lot of free stuff. But VPNs, definitely pay for a VPN. Definitely pay for your email service, because otherwise Google and Yahoo are collecting your data to sell. That's part of their business. Whereas if you're using something like Proton Mail and you pay for your email, which sounds weird to people, right? Pay for email service. But if you pay for it, then what you're purchasing is a email service that has no access to your data, and therefore has to make money in a honest way. And so, yeah, I can give more examples, but do be concerned about free things. But there's a lot of good free and open source software that is not charging you anything as well.
Yeah, and so what do you got to say about search engines?
There's two things you are looking for in a search engine. One is, right, you want to find the truth. And the other is that you don't want that search engine to be collecting your information. So I rarely use Google, and I certainly would never recommend using Google if you're logged into your Gmail account, because then in that browsing session, all of your searches are being tied to your email account, which is tied to your name, right? So I would avoid being logged into Gmail if you're using Google. And in general, I would just set your default. I like to just type in the top of the browser, just type into the URL box a search. So I usually set DuckDuckGo as the basic default kind of search engine. Now, DuckDuckGo is it does not collect your data like Google. It does do censorious things. My friend Jessica Solche, who made a documentary on 3D printed guns, for example, you cannot find her website in the first page for a long time. So it is censorious, DuckDuckGo, but as the default option, that's fine. And when you download something like LibreWolf and you look at the default search engine or search options in the settings, you'll see other various things. You have, let me just check here what some of their options are. So if I go to LibreWolf and settings and search, they have DuckDuckGo, they have Metager, they have CRX, they have Start Page. So there's a whole slew of them. I'm fine with DuckDuckGo, to be honest, but you can also experiment with others. there's the other side of this, Chris, which is you want a search engine to find the truth. So maybe you're okay using Google and you just have a dedicated browser where when you use this browser, you'll use Google and you don't really use this browser for anything else. So you can have as many browsers as you want and you can have that segregation so that you can use big tech without it kind of contaminating the rest of your life. You can also consider, for sheer truthfulness, I like Yandex as an alternative. Yandex is a Russian search engine. And of course, Russian propaganda, whatever. But what it does give you is it gives you a non-woke, usually, non-woke, non-censorious slew of results for what you're searching for. So it's a great option to have in your toolkit. It's not privacy preserving. Don't assume that. But it is a way to get a different view of things. And it's very important to get a different view of things because most people, 93% of people, never check past the first page of search results. So Google and DuckDuckGo and all these other companies can absolutely hide whatever they want to hide. And they do this all the time. And so something like Yandex, just search Google and then you go and search Yandex, you'll see that there are very different results.
Yeah, Yandex, I believe, has a whole suite of things. Like, don't they have a rideshare app and other things as well?
I believe it's kind of a big tech company. I don't use it for anything else. I probably wouldn't use it for anything else, but as a search engine, it can certainly provide some interesting alternatives.
Also, people kind of laugh, but Excite is still out there. I often use it for searches. I mean, this is, one of the pre-Google search engines. And it seems like it's still kind of operating the way it used to operate 25 years ago.
Which is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, my friend was showing me a one of these old-fashioned search engines as well, and I thought it was awesome because how filtered have our search results become in recent years? We think that when we search for something, okay, we're finding the most relevant thing, but we all know that Google is playing politics, and DuckDuckGo and Bing and all these other searches, we know they're playing politics. And so it is refreshing to just get different results. And you can do that just by using an antiquated search engine. So by all means, have a series of bookmarks on your browser so that you say, okay, I usually search DuckDuckGo, but let me just see what Yandex or let me see what Excite has to say about this particular topic. You'll be surprised how different a view of the world you'll get.
Considering Russian companies, I'm surprised you didn't mention Telegram. Because you mentioned Signal and WhatsApp, and of course, Facebook owns WhatsApp. But what do you think about Telegram?
Yeah, and I don't recommend people use WhatsApp, but it can. In that example, I was just talking about how you can have a messenger on your computer as opposed to relying on a phone version of a messenger. But so Telegram is you say Russian. It was founded by a couple of Russian guys. I think they're headquartered in Dubai now. And what's really interesting about Telegram is that it's very much the uncensored internet that we remember. And in fact, if you go to and this is the case as of like a couple weeks ago, I searched in the FAQ at Telegram, their website, and there was a question that said, I found something bad or illegal on Telegram. What do I do? And the Telegram response was, we don't respond to that. And I was like, wow, that's actually pretty refreshing, right? A company that is not censoring anything. Now, is it a honeypot? Could be. Is it a state? Is there a state actor behind it? Could be. Are there 3-letter agencies monitoring a lot of the chat? Probably. I think you should assume all of these things. But that doesn't mean that Telegram is not an awesome place to connect with people, find groups. This is like, if you want to find the truth, if you want to find what's going on in the world, you're not going to find it in an internet browser, okay? You're going to find it on Telegram. And so that's what I would use Telegram for. Learn Telegram, install it on your computer. I believe it does need a phone to sign up initially, but then use it on your computer and lock it down. And you can follow some of my strategies for making sure your programs and such are locked down, and then use it as a way to explore the world and understand the world and connect with people who are very interesting. And as a lot of the people I talk to these days say, I say, hey, where do you get your news? Well, what website? And they say, I don't use websites. I don't visit websites. I go to Telegram groups and I see what these people are suggesting, and I have a conversation with them. And there's oftentimes actual first-person footage from things like the Ukraine war or things of this sort, where that does not exist on the regular internet. It only exists on Telegram.
Yes, definitely. There's some stuff there on Telegram that's there's a lot of. I'm not a big fan of Telegram groups though, because they get way too crazy, and well, they're just very problematic when they get large.
It
But
does tend to chaos, and people definitely need to find solutions, because I see people on Telegram saying we need some kind of regulation, and I'm just like, okay, careful what you ask for. But yeah, you definitely want to go into Telegram if you're having problems with it. Try to, every Telegram group needs a strong set of admins, basically.
I'm just disappointed that Telegram seems to have become a replacement for message boards, and message boards worked very, very well at organizing discussions. Telegram is just a mess. And it doesn't matter how good the admins are. And then people just have this attitude, well, I can't use message boards because they're old. Anyway, do you use anything like PayPal or anything like that or not?
Right. So financial privacy, PayPal definitely cannot be on your list of things. My brand here, privacy brand, is just one part of my life. So I have businesses that I run and things of this sort. So I do have to interact with the financial institutions and some of these other things. I can't escape them fully. But one thing I've never allowed on any of my stuff is PayPal, because PayPal is a nasty, nasty company, much more than other big financial companies. PayPal has been known to, and this is public information, they share your data with hundreds of other third parties, some of whom my understanding is people search websites. So, I mean, it sounds bizarre, but it seems to be the case. So PayPal also demands more information. Can demand more information than even a bank can. So you used to be able to use it kind of with minimal information, maybe give a fake name here or there. And some people can still get away with that sort of thing. But if they lock you down, which they often do, they have terrible customer service. If they lock you down, I've known people who have been locked out of PayPal accounts with very large amounts, and they cannot get back in, or not very easily. So it really is a crummy company, and it's doing all kinds of surveillance and selling your data. So I would definitely not recommend PayPal. But it kind of depends what you're after, right? Are you trying to collect funds? I'm a big proponent of Bitcoin, and especially Monero, as ways to just escape a lot of this financial surveillance, especially Monero. I think you can do a lot with the cryptocurrency, and I want to see more people collecting funds through those means, and that's what I do with all of my products.
Yeah, and let's also remind everyone that PayPal also owns Venmo, so I don't think there really is an alternative to PayPal nowadays. This brings me up. This brings me to another topic too, and I'm getting kind of worried about this guy. He was involved with PayPal, involved with other companies. What do you think about Peter Thiel?
Yeah, this is a good question. Peter Thiel was involved with Elon Musk early on in PayPal, and then they sold it. I think there's a book called The PayPal Mafia that people can kind of track down. I haven't read it myself, but I've heard that that's an interesting explanation of it. So Peter Thiel is a billionaire, an American billionaire. I think he was originally from, I forget where he's originally from, but he's an American billionaire, and he got his money from investment in PayPal and Facebook and some other companies. And he's kind of been, it seems, for the last decade plus, just kind of sitting back. He is also the owner, I believe, of Palantir, which is a huge data collection company, which is named after the crystal ball, surveillance ball from Lord of the Rings. Come on, are we serious with that? The Palantir, nobody watches Lord of the Rings or reads it and says, oh, Palantir. what a great thing. I'll name my company after that, right? So, and my understanding is that Palantir, this has been brought up recently, especially J.D. Vance, the vice president of that Trump has selected as a candidate. He's heavily connected to Peter Thiel. I believe they're close friends, J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel. So we can assume that there's some Thiel funding behind all of that. But yeah, Palantir Technologies and whatever else Peter Thiel is working on, he presented himself as a libertarian, and he seems to hold strong libertarian values. But his activities and his company Palantir, which is a private company, I believe it mostly contracts with the government for kind of data collection and analysis. And I don't know a whole lot more about it at this point. Those are not libertarian values in practice.
Yeah. I really wonder if he's if he's. It's hard to say where he is, but that's why I brought him up, because there's just a lot of things that he seems to have his hands in. He was actually born in Frankfurt, but he's pretty much been a world traveler. Looks like he has citizenship in New Zealand too. So I thought that was interesting, just seeing where he's. Yeah, he has New Zealand citizenship, but
right. He's one of these guys who's very interested in internationalization. I believe also in de-aging, the anti-aging movement. I think he has a company that researches that. So yeah, he's, at one point in my life, he was a kind of an interesting, almost inspiring figure. But anybody who's involved in data collection and analysis company, and I don't know. I mean, it's good to be skeptical. Let's just say that.
Yeah, it makes me wonder what they want to do with all this data. But that's why I brought him up. The connection to J.D. Vance. I think he's also connected to Vivek and a few other people. It's but it might be interesting to see. This isn't. We're getting to a sad place where I think people are probably getting more pessimistic about technology, even things that could be absolutely wonderful. Like anti-aging. I mean, why would we want to ever oppose that? But because you have so many people out there just seem to be using it for purposes that I don't trust. It's hard to say.
Yeah, no, and I'm assuming Fountainhead is named off of Ayn Rand, your platform. Is that right?
Yeah. I wanted to call it a forum, and so
right.
I thought, what's a word that starts with an F?
So yeah, this has occurred to me a lot recently, Chris. I'm a big fan of Ayn Rand. Fountainhead is one of my favorite books ever. Easy recommendation. But the world where all of these, where you have these dispassionate, completely self-interested people creating these huge companies and industries like in Atlas Shrugged, those just don't exist. Like there's nobody actually like Hank Rearden in the world. They're all getting money from the government. They're all in bed with the government. And this idea that you can have a corporation, a huge company, and it is, as principled as Ayn Rand's novels, I don't even know if it's possible in the world. So I've had my kind of idealism crushed a little bit, and my skepticism has only been stoked by the seemingly nefarious public policy viewpoints that a lot of these billionaires and people of industry have these days.
Well, I don't know how old you are or how much you can remember, but I can remember going back to, say, 1998, and all these guys in Congress were looking around, and it's like, you mean this Microsoft company doesn't employ a single lobbyist? And that was a case of a company that, regardless of now I think you might, kind of now Gates always engaged in some, I think, rather heavy-handed tactics with intellectual property, but here was a guy who basically really wasn't trying to play the Washington game, and and they finally said, "Oh yeah, well, you're going to play it whether you want to or not." I mean, I don't know how you respond to that, but really, I think that optimism about tech and really the optimism about the liberty movement hasn't come back since then. And unfortunately, also, I think the World Trade Center really unleashed this, this whole state of security theater and surveillance and all this other crap.
Yeah, it really is a changed world since well, we can say around 2001. It really is a radically changed world, and government is not shrinking. It has been increasing. I believe Ayn Rand thought that Atlas Shrugged. She was so ecstatic about publishing that, spent however many years, more than 10 years, I think, writing that. And she thought this is going to change the world. People are going to finally understand collectivism is bad. Government intervention into pretty much anything is bad. And it influenced a lot of people, but our problems have only gotten worse since then. And yeah, from my angle, a lot of the verification and emphasis on security, which is not a real thing, right? Safety does not exist in the world. It's not a real thing. Everything's a trade-off. And locking people up is actually very not safe for their health and other things. So I'm actually developing this theory that safety is an illusion. There's actually no such thing as safety. And so there's no reason to even talk about it. But yeah, this emphasis on security and safety over freedom is just been so overwhelming in the last few years. Of course, COVID made a lot of people take the black pill. And so, yeah, I don't know. I hope to get out of this mindset and the skepticism. But for now, I'm unfortunately that I'm almost as skeptical now of corporations as the government. And to be fair, a lot of their clients and a lot of their people they're beholden to are the U.S. government.
That's another thing too, though. I was a hotel receptionist back in the 90s, and we generally didn't ask anybody for ID. I think almost all the hotels do that now.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of policy, just because, and that's also partially because, hotel guests, they go and they break stuff, they damage the property, that's another factor. But, it's really just, I think that, the going from a high trust society to a low trust society. And I think you necessarily have to live in a high trust society to have a free society. This also makes me wonder about one thing, though. Do you think if you want to be free, you're better off moving to a country that's maybe a little more, a country that's a little more backward? I mean, Mexico obviously hasn't went as far as the U.S. with stuff like this. I mean, Mexico is still very much a cash society. I mean, people have credit cards, but, there are a lot of businesses in Mexico where cash is all they take. What do you think? What do you think about maybe going elsewhere if you want to have privacy?
A couple of years ago, as early as a year or two ago, I was a big proponent of internationalization, and I've traveled a lot around the world. Yeah, I'm good to keep going here for a little bit. And I was part of an internationalization seminar earlier this year with Mikkel Thorup, who runs a great company called Expat Money. So
Oh yes,
I've thought a lot.
and I forgot to mention. You mentioned Jessica Solche, of course, that documentary about Cody Wilson. Yeah, bless his heart. Yeah. That's where I found it. I think I found you in the Expat Money forum, and that's what I said. Yeah, I got to get this guy on.
Right. And Mikkel and I are friends. So this is a lot of stuff I think about. But you know who else I came across recently, Chris, was a person who's been on your show and had a couple of amazing episodes, was Jayant Bhandari, who is an Indian guy born in India. And he talks about the third world in such a compelling way that I have become a Bhandarian. I really have. I've had him on my show. I'm about to release my 6th episode with him. And we've talked about some really amazing stuff. And his viewpoint is that you have the West and the rest, and the West is rational. That's the common denominator. And the rest is irrational. And at first I didn't want to believe him. I was like, okay, this guy's exaggerating. And then I started studying it and applying it and traveling the world. And every single thing I saw reinforced exactly what he said. So I don't think I would want to live in a third world country like Mexico for the long run. You can get freedom in the short term for sure. And there's more options for privacy, mostly because it's a backward country, and I use that word very strongly about these places. So yeah, is there opportunity to slip through the cracks, get the gringo advantage in some cases, escape the tax net and all these kind of things? Absolutely. But go and spend some time there first, wherever you're talking about, and see if that's a place that you would like to live. Because my reaction leaving the West and going to these places with kind of a fresh pair of eyes is get me back home as soon as I can. I'll take the surveillance in my home country.
There are definitely some advantages and disadvantages. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd call Mexico third world, but I mean, it's definitely not as modern as the USA, but I don't know that I can say the poorest country I've been to is still Peru, but and even other people in Latin America will talk about that. But but it also depends on if you're in the big cities versus the country.
Yeah, I'll leave Giant to talk more about these kind of issues, but yeah, just keep your eyes open. I've visited many third world countries since kind of having my eyes opened like this, and I'll just say go and visit yourself and learn and understand, and don't. I think a lot of libertarians, especially, can have this political correctness where they just think that economics is the only thing. It's these third world countries. Their problem is socialism. No, it's not. They don't even understand socialism. Socialism does not exist as a concept in the third world. It's a complex thing. Socialism. We'll give them the credit for that. It's a complex idea. That's not what's going on in the third world. That's not Mexico's problem. It's not that it's a socialist country. That's not the problem. Economics is far subsidiary to culture, and societies basically get the government that they deserve. Is the idea that I've arrived at, and totalitarianism will always be the and you can see this in Africa. Pretty much any African country will always be the kind of the long-term product of any of these countries is what I'm starting to think.
Well, what countries stood out as really bad or really good in your opinion? Sounds like you're pretty well traveled.
Not too well traveled. So I think other people would be better suited to discuss that. But no, I keep an eye on things. I try to read a lot of history and news. And one of the things is, Chris, that and these are things that I'll give Giant Bandari credit. He's kind of pointed out these various things. 99.999% of the evil things that happen in the world happen in third world countries. And I don't exaggerate that number. Why don't we hear about it? Well, because they don't really have journalism. Because journalism requires self-criticism. Self-criticism is a product of rational minds. So you have things like Papua New Guinea, where I think it's like the average man has actually killed another human being, where rape is not considered a crime, where all kinds of horrific things happen, but it never gets reported on. In fact, it's not even interesting in those places. It's just called Tuesday. And so that's the thing to keep in mind, is that all the things that you think are happening, even when you visit a place, right, you're going to get the benefit of being a maybe white Westerner visiting. You're never going to see the real thing. You could live with the family in Africa for a year and still never see what's really happening. So all I'm going to say is that there's a mindset that you should approach these places with that does not have the libertarian political correctness that economics is the only problem, or government is the only problem with these places. Try to have the mindset that your forebears understood very well, which is that there's very hard differences between what the West has developed and what the rest has developed.
Yeah, that's true. One thing I just realized I forgot to ask you about. What you got to say about password management?
Yeah, so I think it's wise to consider another passport. And
no, I said password.
Oh, sorry.
Passwords for your computer.
Gotcha. Yeah. Passwords should be so long and complex for almost all your accounts that you have no possibility of remembering them, which means that you need a password manager in order to remember them for you. There's only two password messengers I recommend. The first is KeePass XC. It is offline. It never touches the internet. It never syncs with anything. So you need to have it on a single computer. You need to copy that database to another computer if you want to use it there. And you should obviously back up all these kind of things so you don't lose them. But that's a very secure password manager, mostly because it's offline. If you must sync between devices, you have Bitwarden. And I don't use Bitwarden because I can manage with the offline approach, but Bitwarden has all the zero-knowledge encryption proofs, etc., that it is trustworthy enough that you can use that. I don't really recommend any others, but you can and should use a password manager. You should only remember the password to your device. which should be around 20 characters. You can use maybe 3 or 4 words and put a symbol or 2 in between. Length is really the most important thing in a password. That's, you want to get 20 characters. That's the most important thing. So you remember the password to your device. You remember the password to your password manager. And after that, you shouldn't remember any other passwords. The password manager lets you generate, let's say, 30-character random passwords for all of your accounts. That's what you should be doing. You should go in and change all of your passwords to a long random password and document them in your password manager, and not only remember those 2 passwords in your life. That's certainly the best way to go about password management.
Okay, yeah. And one thing else I should ask, do you have any opinions on data backup?
I do. My last episode, and it's August 1st, 2024, when we're recording this. My last episode on the Watchman Privacy podcast, we talked about backups. Backups are crucial, especially if you take the privacy red pill and you realize that you need to keep all of your data offline. You need to stop using Dropbox and stop using Google Drive and have all of your data on your computer right in front of you as offline files. Once you take that red pill, you also need to realize that you're responsible now for that. If your computer stops working and goes up in flames, you lose all that data forever. That goes to data heaven. You never see it again. So you absolutely need to, first of all, become aware of the importance of offline data. And then you need to back up that data. So you can just use a service like, the first thing to do is you just put that onto another device in your home is the first thing. So at least it's protected from your first computer going up in flames. So that's the first thing you can do. As you get more advanced, you definitely want to encrypt those backups so that nobody can just, find your hard drive lying around and plug it in and have access to it. So you want to use an encryption service software like Veracrypt and just play around with that a little bit. I talk about that in my tutorials, like Escape the Technocracy is my tutorial. We have a nice explanation of that. But you learn something like Veracrypt. You put your files into your Veracrypt encrypted container, and then you can back that up wherever you want on another device and then on a third device, which you put on, let's say, a USB key ring, something like this. If you do that basic stuff, you're doing pretty well at that point.
Yeah. And I guess one final question. What's the best way to manage your Bitcoin private keys or anything like that?
So, good question. Your Bitcoin seed phrase, it's a good idea to have an offline version of this. We actually just, I know it seems like I'm shilling. We actually just released a product where you can print off a document and you can put in your seed phrase. And these look like innocuous things like a humidity monitoring thing where you just kind of write your seed phrase in these particular parts of the document, or like a birthday card. So it has kind of innocuous things. You back up your seed phrase onto those, can fold it in half, laminate it, and then put it in a very protected part of your house or somebody else's property. Good thing at that point to have, let's say, a 25th word for your Bitcoin seed phrase, so that people can't just type in the seed phrase and walk away with your funds. But yeah, I want to also be cautious about answering the question too quickly, because backing up your Bitcoin private keys depends on a lot of things, right? Do you actually own the Bitcoin, or do you have it on Coinbase or something? So, and obviously, if you have a significant amount of wealth, there are additional things that you want to consider and do before you just go start backing it up and hiding it in certain places. So I want to be cautious about just answering that quickly. You should definitely look into it more. I have a lot of episodes on my show talking about that exact topic. But yeah, backing up the seed phrase is a crucial part of being a Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency owner.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else I really want to talk about right now. Yeah, you got anything else you want to say before we go? This has been a great talk.
Yeah, let's see. What else did we not cover? It does boil down to just not giving out your information. And when you go to a website and it asks for an email, Well, you can first ask, okay, do I need to use this service? And if you do, then you don't want to give your real email. So you can use something like a simple login, which is a alternative, which is a email service which you can kind of generate one-off emails that connect to your real email address, but the company does not see that it does. A little bit hard to explain, but basically, every time you encounter a scenario where it seems like you have to give information, you should first of all question whether or not you need that service. Oftentimes you don't. You should then see if you can get away with not giving that information, right? Then after that, you can consider giving alternative information, whether that's a simple login email or whether that is a secondary phone. Maybe you have a burner phone, or you use a service like MySudo, which is pretty good at giving you up to 9 phone numbers that you can segregate parts of your life. And you will find the methods to give the information that the company that's asking for it deserves. And that's really the heart of privacy. It's not, it's not, hey, download this thing, install this thing, we'll protect all your privacy. It is about user choice, user decision, and restricting your information, right? I was recently at an airport. They had the cameras. People were just standing on the front of the cameras to verify their passports. I just stepped to the side and I said, hey, is this required? And they said, oh, no, it's not. And they just looked at my passport, compared it to my face. So the world is a lot more optional than you think. And being a privacy-seeking person is putting your foot down and stop giving out your data. That's really at the heart of things. I think you also mentioned there are deeper issues at work here. We don't live in a trust-based society. We need to tackle those sorts of things if we want privacy in our society in the long term, because privacy is a social definition. It's a societal concept, and we can kind of hide individual things as individuals, and I'm all for that. But in the long run, we need to have a civilization that, like our ancestors in the West, that respected privacy as a key part of being a human.
Yeah, definitely. Well, where can people find you on the internet?
If you go to Watchman Privacy, you'll find all my stuff. I have one of the best things I have is a series of privacy courses, or a privacy course. It's called Escape the Technocracy. You can find it on the website, and we basically walk you step by step in a reasonable manner to getting some pretty awesome extreme privacy. And it's friendly for newcomers. That's always been my approach, is we're going to go as far as we can. We're not going to talk about threat models, but we are going to realize that people are starting from the beginning. And I'm always happy to explain things at a basic level, and then let's get as extreme as we can. I think it's the best privacy content on the internet. That's always been what I've been after. I was very displeased with the privacy stuff that I saw when I started this brand, and I tried to make something better, and I think I did. So just watchmanprivacy.com. You'll find my free podcast as well, and some other things. I have some books coming out, etc.
Yeah, it sounds like some good stuff out there. Well, thank you very much, Gabriel. And I'm Chris Baker. Please like please like the video, subscribe to the channel, go buy my novel Escape from the Village, and check out my Substack. Thank you again, and we're out.